Psalm 139. I encourage you to turn there with me if you have a Bible. Oh, and send the sign-in pads back down the row if you make sure everyone signs in and you see who's around you, all right? We're family. So, Psalm 139. We're going to be reading verses 13 through 18. Would you stand for the reading of the Word? Psalm 139, beginning with verse 13. The psalmist says, kind of a prayer, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me." It's the word of the Lord. You may be seated. All right. Human life. Oops, I got to turn this thing on. You know what it is, right? From young to old, from white to black and every shade in between. It is precious, isn't it? I hope you believe what I tell you frequently, that there's nothing as precious as human life. I like dogs. I like trees, but, we are the only ones who bear the image of God. We are, the pinnacle of God's creative activity. Unlike anything else in all of creation, human life is precious. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Does that mean God has hands and feet and kidneys? Well, that's what the Mormons believe, but I don't really think that is why we look like this. I think God created us this way so we could, thrive on planet Earth. Functional. I don't know how God looks. Are we eternal like God? Again, the Mormons kind of believe that. I'm not going to bash the Mormons much today. I did that already, but I think, our souls pre-existed and they became flesh, and then they live forever. And I think a lot of Christians kind of think, that part of us is eternal. And I kind of lean toward saying, without the miracle of resurrection, if Christ didn't defeat death, we're history too. So I'm not so sure that's what makes us, God-like, image of God. I think it's His moral imprint upon us, this innate sense of what is right and wrong, the ability to reason at a high level, and obviously the spiritual part that can respond to a spiritual God. Image of God. One of the reasons we're precious. The reason. All right. Human life is precious. Human life is amazing. You are amazing. All 37.2 trillion cells of you. That's a lot of cells. 60,000 miles of blood vessels. If they could string your blood vessels, end to end, it would wrap around the earth like 3 times. That's how much, piping you have inside of you. It's mind-boggling. Our brains, it's estimated, have the equivalent, capacity of a 4 terabyte hard drive. That's a lot of memory there, right? I think I heard that would, you could record every book that Kindle sells, like 1 million books on a 4 terabyte hard drive. Bones 5 times stronger than steel, yet somehow they break. Human eye, equivalent of a 576 megapixel camera. And I don't know how they figured this out, but estimated that we can recognize around 1 trillion different smells, unique smells. It's just some amazing, facts about the human body. But what I want to focus on is how miraculous we are. And by miraculous, I mean created. We couldn't just, get lucky enough to be alive. It didn't just happen by chance. I spent a lot of time reading about this, thinking about this in the last week, and still have no idea how to present that. So Louis Giglio is going to help us for a few minutes this morning. So let's watch this clip.
We are a miracle. You're a miracle sitting in the building tonight. If I could just remind you just for a moment, you are somebody incredibly special. Let me just dial back to the beginning, and I know you know this already, but in the very, very beginning, here's how you happened, okay? 1 cell from your mom found 1 cell from your dad. Now, there's more involved than that, but that's enough for us right now. And by the way, we should applaud the 1 cell from your dad, because that 1 cell did a pretty heroic thing to be the 1 cell in the story that we're talking about tonight. 1 cell from your mom met up with 1 cell from your dad, each one carrying 23 chromosomes. The one from your mom was carrying half of her DNA. The one from your dad was carrying half of his DNA. And those 2 cells met and merged into 1 single cell. And when they did, those chromosomes matched, and they began to form together a brand new DNA code. Using 4 characters, 4 nucleotides, they begin to write out what we have now discovered is the 3 billion character description of who you are, written in the language of God. They wrote out your DNA, your human genome of 3 billion characters made up of those 4 simple nucleotides. And when they did, they described who God had ordained you to be. In that 1 little simple cell. Scientists say if you took the DNA out of that 1 little cell and stretched it out, that DNA would be 6 feet long, 3 billion characters stretched out to 6 feet long. So amazing that if I were to read your DNA, reading 1 character per second, night and day, it would take me 96 years just to read the description of you. And when they formed together, they wrote out and painted a picture which had never been written before in the history of humankind. And then that cell did the unthinkable. It set out to build that model from 1 cell. I'm telling you, you are a miracle sitting in this building tonight. And you have come a long, long way. I mean, here you are. This may not be in the family photo album, but here you are at 3 days old. 16 cells of you. You say, what in the world is that? It's a 16-cell human embryo on the tip of a safety pin at incredible magnification. So by now, that 1 cell had turned into 16 cells on its way to making the 75 trillion cells that make up your body tonight. Every one of those 75 trillion cells containing that 6 feet of the 3 billion character DNA code that you. There's so much DNA in your body, by the way. If you stretched it all end to end, there'd be enough DNA to go to the moon and back inside your body. 178,000 times. That's how amazing God has made you to be. 75 trillion cells in your body. And when I told you that, 50,000 of those cells died and were replaced by brand new cells when I told you that. And then just now, 50,000 more cells died and were replaced by brand new cells. It's happening every 3 seconds, day and night, all the days of your existence. And you wonder why you're tired all the time. I'll tell you, you're doing some amazing stuff night and day. We're miracles, you and me. I love the way Augustine said it, one of the great fathers of the church and of the faith. He just nailed it when he said it like this. Men go abroad to wonder at the height of mountains, the huge waves of the sea, the long course of rivers, the vast compass of the ocean, the circular motion of the stars. But they pass by themselves and they don't even notice. In the womb, miracles happening every moment. Here you are at 5 months in the womb. You remember those days? Those were the good old days. And just miracles happening every second. Let me tell you about one. Million optic nerve endings left the optic nerve center of your brain in the womb, headed for 1 million optic nerves that had left your eye. And they had to meet and match their exact partner, 1 million looking for 1 million. And when they found their exact partner out of 1 million and matched up together, in that instant you had sight. And anyone would tell you that to this moment, the most technologically advanced thing on planet Earth is your eye. Oh, but it didn't do you any good, because when that moment happened, you just had one piece of skin completely covering your eyeball. But as I read in one textbook, miraculously and mysteriously at about the 6th month, a little cutting device appeared and it cut perfectly that piece of skin. And you had eyelids for the very first time in your mother's womb. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And the God of the heavens is the one who fashioned you together.
Amen. And from what I've read, studied, chemical and biological evolution are inadequate explanations for human life. The cell is just too complex. If stuff kind of randomly came together, there still had to be some instructions, some code to line it up, all right? So this was an illustration I read. You know what Scrabble is? Do kids play Scrabble? Probably not. But, the game where you spell words with these wooden letters. Well, if I had a bag of Scrabble letters today and just had, 10 of you pull out a letter and just line it up in order, what are the odds that we'd actually get a word out of that? Pretty slim, There are 250 to 400 amino acids in protein. And, can't remember all the numbers, but maybe hundreds of proteins in a human cell. And they all have to be in the right order for them to do what they're supposed to do. They all have a job to do. They have to work together in harmony. And the odds of that happening, and there was all kinds of math, and it got too confusing to me. It was 1 times 10 with 184 zeros. The odds of, the cell coming together, and just one of thousands of things that had to happen in order for human life to exist. And I don't know about you, but I don't have enough faith to believe it was just chance. It takes more faith to deny intelligent design than to believe it. I mean, of course, science and our society really doesn't lean that way. Most people kind of believe in God, but we have science on our side. Too many things to explain, and the theories of how it happened are just ridiculous. All right, so I just thought that was a cool way to ease into the sermon because we've dedicated a baby. But this is my 6th sabbatical sermon, and on my, hiking ventures out west, this is what kind of messed me up. I saw these magnificent geological formations and phenomenon. That's the Delicate Arch at Arches, the hoodoos at Bryce Canyon, just rock formations everywhere. And the canyon itself is the phenomenon. Of course, the Grand Canyon. That's got all its, layers, the strata that make up the Grand Canyon. Have you seen it before? I mean, all these different colors. I'm curious if you're awake. Anyone been to the Grand Canyon? We're all going, all right? After church, we're heading south because it's just spectacular. And, it's made up of these layers. Kaibab, I can't even pronounce some of those. Supal layers, red wall, limestone layers that could only have been formed through, certain pressures and time and natural phenomenon, supposedly. And that was the question. I'm reading about this. And, of course, at these national parks, they all talk about the millions of years it took. I'm thinking, I was talking to God a lot. Is it really that old? And so, it took water, and we kind of believe that because there was a big flood at one point. They say there was water covering those lands, all over the United States, at least at that point. The plates, the tectonic plates colliding and grinding and causing things to rise and fall. Erosion, that's the biggie. What happens, when water's moving fast and wind. And you could see the effects of erosion all around, Utah. But here's the question. Did it take hundreds of millions of years? And does it even matter if the earth is that old? It makes me a little uneasy because it's like, okay, the older the earth is, maybe the more plausible, possible, evolution could be, even though they still can't explain, these miracles that happen at regular intervals. So I was talking to my brother-in-law about this stuff because he's studied a lot of this stuff and he's really smart. He said, well, look up the polystrate fossils, right? And it's just one of the not the loopholes, the holes in these kind of theories, that it took hundreds of millions of years for canyons to form and other geological phenomena. And we have these fossils often of trees that exist through multiple strata. These layers, sediment that compacted over, millions, tens of millions of years, and then more. And there's a tree through like 3 layers of strata, or at least a couple of them. And it just begins to poke holes in science. So that's about as far as I'm going there. But I just want to point out, for our students especially, that science, there's a lot of theory in science. It's not fact. It hasn't been observed. No human was around hundreds of millions of years ago to write this stuff down. And they can't duplicate it in a laboratory. So it's theory. It's not fact. In our church library, we have some pretty cool books. The Answer books by Ken Ham, he's the editor, and deals with, questions that, we want to know answers to, like, how old is the earth? Can natural processes explain the origin of life? Do humans evolve? Blah, blah, blah. One of the cool questions was, it must have been in another one. Are creationists weird? It was something like that, People who actually believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible. Where does that, fit in? And so I encourage you, there's lots of stuff out there that suggests maybe there are other ways to view the history of our planet and universe. And honestly, I'm not adamant that it all happened in, 6 literal days. I lean toward a young earth theory, but whether the universe is young or old, okay? God designed it, right? There's too many things that can't be explained by natural processes, by natural law. We don't know how God did this because we weren't there, but I think a few others, that God really created the heavens, all that's out there, and the earth we live on. The Lord merely spoke. I think it was Louis Giglio said, and light shot out of his mouth at 186,000 miles per second? Speed of light. Things just started exploding. He breathed out stars, the psalmist says. And maybe it's, a metaphor, but I think he could do anything. An almighty, eternal God. I'm not going to put limitations on him. The Lord merely spoke and the heavens were created. He breathed the word and all the stars were born. He assigned the sea its boundaries and locked the oceans in vast reservoirs. Let the whole world fear the Lord and let everyone stand in awe of him. For when he spoke, the world began. It appeared at his command. I've talked about some of this stuff before. Even if God, used some type of processes, the Big Bang kind of theory. Science has no idea who put the stuff there and who, lit the match. Big Bang comes back to this question. There had to be someone to put the stuff there, the matter that now fills the universe. But, I tend to believe that God spoke creation into existence. Creation testifies to a creator. The stars, the galaxies, the planets, the physical laws, chemistry, biology, geology, anatomy. There are so many instances where things had to be precise and perfect to the nth degree. Now, I'm gonna hurt myself here. These are fine-tuning parameters for the universe, right? So the strong nuclear force constant, if it were any larger than it is, no hydrogen would form. Atomic nuclei for most life-sustaining elements would be unstable. Thus, no life chemistry, no life. If smaller, no elements heavier than hydrogen would form, and again, no life. And there's like 30 of them here. Gravitational force constant. Finely tuned, if it was any larger than it is, stars would be too hot and would burn too rapidly and too unevenly for life chemistry. If gravity affects life. If it was any smaller, stars would be too cool and ignite nuclear fusion. And again, it's bad news for us. Electromagnetic force. ratio of electrons to proton mass, expansion rate of the universe, velocity of light, things that I just can't understand, but you look into it, even scientists, most of them say, it's pretty amazing that we're actually here in light of all the things that had to be perfectly calibrated for life, And they pretty much say, well, because we're here, then everything worked out just right. But it just begs us to ask the question, how could this be? You saw that exponential number, a whole bunch of zeros. So there's a whole bunch of zeros with every one of those. The odds of them actually happening and all of them happening together. I don't have enough faith to believe we could be here by chance. There's obvious evidence of intelligent design. And I kind of think that intelligent being was the God of the Bible. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. It's out there, people. They speak without a sound or a word. Their voice is never heard, yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the worlds. This is what Paul says in Romans. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. See, that's probably why our society leans toward evolution, because they don't want to deal with the reality. There is a God, If you conclude that, then you just have to ask the question, well, so what am I supposed to do in light of that? How do I respond if there is this infinite, intelligent being? I submit that faith can stand the tests of science, of the disappointments of life. Anyone read the article this week? I forget the publication. Talked about, Michael and Linda Gungor. They're a Christian rock group, singing group. For a while, they denied there was a God. They claimed to be atheists because they struggled getting pregnant. And when they did have a child, I think their second child was born with birth defects. And there was a cousin who had cancer. And these things can shake the foundation. And we start asking the question, if there's a God, then why is life so hard? And so many people allow their disappointments to rob them of faith. And there aren't easy answers, but we live in a fallen world. Faith can stand the test. I saw a bunch of these. I think this was at Bryce Canyon. And it just intrigued me. I'm not even sure it's a good illustration. But there are these trees, and I wish I had shown above, because they're green, they're leafing. But yet, they look like they're hanging in midair, because the ground around has eroded. But the roots go down deep. They're not going to be shaken, because the roots are secure. They can weather the storms of life. And again, we, as Christians, I think at times realize some of the things we thought were so important may not be, but we believe in a God who has always existed and created all of us and is active in his world. God is large and in charge. Breathes out stars, we said, and galaxies. We think about our own solar system with the sun and our little blue planet, and we got, Saturn and Jupiter, and you think this is one star of 100 billion stars in our own galaxy, and one galaxy of 100 billion galaxies in our universe. And God created it all. And you think, well, why would he bother with me? I mean, who am I that he even knows me? That's kind of how I feel. Even looking at the Grand Canyon, I'm so small and insignificant. This story came to mind. Anyone recognize it? Horton Hears a Who. Citizens of Whoville living on this dust speck on a flower. They're going to be destroyed unless people realize they exist. So they just call out, we're here, we're here. You ever find yourself doing that? God, I'm here. Do you know? Do you care? Do you have time for me when you're out making other galaxies and black holes and quasars and all that cool stuff? Jesus reminds us that he knows when a sparrow falls. God does not forget a single sparrow. And the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. He knows and cares about everyone. He's that big to create 1 billion galaxies and keep track of you and me. He knows the day you were conceived, when those 2 cells came together and mapped out your life. He knows the day you were born, you took your first breath, introduced yourself to the world. He knows your name. He knows your joys and sorrows, dreams and heartaches. He knows your struggle and even your sin. Nothing is hidden from him. I remember in the garden when Adam and Eve are hiding because they've sinned, and you can't hide from God, but he knows, and he's able to help. We're not alone. This God of creation wants to be your friend. That's good news today. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to ponder. Probably don't do it enough because more and more Christians, by evolution, they get sucked into the agenda that ultimately diminishes life, Lord. Makes it easy to kill babies when we're random, we're here by chance. But I believe that we're not, that you wanted us here, that you caused that daddy's cell to meet the mama's cell because you wanted us to live, and more than that, you wanted us to know you and love you, God. And you want to help us with the struggles of life. You want to celebrate our joys. You want to wipe away our tears when life is hard. Just remind us again today how much you care about us. Thank you. Stand and sing together.
I have a maker. He formed my heart before even time began. My life was in his hands.
That was a little too somber for such good news today. He knows you. He loves you. And he's going to help you this week. So leave here encouraged and hopeful. He's a great big God. And he's there when you call upon him. So have a great week. Go in peace.